3 identical little girls, no older than 6, stared up at him with unblinking blue eyes. Their fingers were sticky with melting strawberry ice cream, dripping onto the pristine pavement. Vincent didn't care about kids. He cared about the shipment coming in at midnight. But then the middle one stepped forward, pointing a small, sticky finger at the rolled-up sleeve of his tailored shirt. "Hello, sir," she chirped. "Our mother has a tattoo just like yours." Vincent stopped breathing. The jagged compass pointing southeast on his forearm suddenly burned. Cigarette smoke and burnt sugar hung heavy in the humid afternoon air. Vincent hated street festivals, but the syndicate needed the good PR. So he stood near the edge of the cordoned-off square, pretending to sip a lukewarm espresso from a flimsy paper cup. The cardboard was going soft under his thumb. He tasted the sour acidity of the cheap coffee and immediately tossed it into a nearby overflowing trash can. His knuckles still ached from the night before, a dull, rhythmic throb at the base of his index finger. He rubbed it absent-mindedly, his gaze sweeping over the crowd of oblivious civilians. Sweaty bodies, loud music, the greasy smell of fried dough. It was suffocating. He pulled back the left sleeve of his linen shirt, letting the faint breeze hit his skin. The fabric scraped against the old faded ink on his forearm, a jagged compass, its needle permanently stuck pointing southeast. A stupid, impulsive mistake from 8 years ago, etched in a basement parlor in Brooklyn while a woman with whiskey on her breath held his other hand. He felt the tug on his trousers before he saw them. Vincent looked down, a sharp retort dying on his tongue. 3 of them, identical down to the unruly mess of curly brown hair and the missing left front tooth. They wore faded yellow sundresses, the hems dusted with street dirt. The one on the left was chewing her lower lip. The one on the right was aggressively attacking a melting cone of strawberry ice cream, the pink sludge coating her knuckles. The one in the middle, apparently the ringleader, wiped her hand unceremoniously on her dress and pointed right at his exposed arm. "Hello, sir," she said. Her voice was painfully bright, cutting through the low hum of his impending migraine. "Our mother has a tattoo just like yours." Vincent froze. It wasn't a poetic pause. It was a violent physical halt of his nervous system. His lungs locked up, refusing to expel air. The ambient noise of the festival, the screeching rides, the laughing teenagers, the distant police sirens turned into static. He stared at the girl's finger. It was hovering inches from the compass. No one has this tattoo. It wasn't flash art off a parlor wall. He had drawn it himself on a napkin. Southeast, the direction they were supposed to drive when they finally got out of the city. He got his. She never showed up to get hers. She just vanished. "What did you say?" Vincent's voice cracked. It sounded like gravel scraping against sheet metal. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't offer a gentle smile. He loomed over them, his broad shoulders tensing, his heart hammering a frantic, heavy beat against his ribs. The middle girl shrank back slightly, intimidated by the sudden shift in his posture, but she held her ground. "Your picture," she mumbled, pointing again, less confidently this time. "Mama has the broken compass. On her ribs. I saw it when she was changing into her work shirt." Vincent felt a cold sweat break across the back of his neck. His stomach pitched. He looked closely at the girls for the first time. The ice cream, the dirt, the cheap dresses. But beneath that, the sharp slope of their noses, the defiant tilt of the middle one's chin, the startling pale blue of their eyes. His eyes. "Where is your mother?" he asked. The words barely made it past the tight constriction in his throat. He reached out, his large, calloused hand hovering near the girl's shoulder, terrified to actually touch her. He smelled damp earth and artificial strawberry. She's getting napkins. The ice cream eater piped up, completely oblivious to the air being sucked out of the space around them. Maya, don't talk to strangers. A voice snapped from the crowd. Vincent's blood turned to ice. It was a voice he had spent the last 7 years trying to drown out with cheap whiskey, expensive women, and the deafening roar of gunfire. It was raspy, laced with perpetual exhaustion, yet unmistakably hers. He turned his head slowly. The muscles in his neck felt tight, rigid. She was pushing through a group of teenagers, clutching a wad of thin, brown paper napkins. She wasn't the pristine memory he kept locked in the back of his mind. She looked thin, tired. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, strands escaping to stick to her sweaty forehead. She wore a faded grey t-shirt that belonged to a hardware store, and her jeans were frayed at the hems. She shoved past a large man, her eyes locked on her daughters, scolding them before she even fully processed who they were talking to. I told you 3 to stay by the bench. Do you have any idea how— Her voice died. She looked up. Her eyes met Vincent's. The brown paper napkins slipped from her fingers, scattering like dead leaves onto the sticky asphalt. For a second, nobody moved. The air between them felt dense, like water right before it boils. Vincent looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt a sick knot of anger and relief twisting in his gut. Linda. 7 years. He had ripped apart the city looking for her. He had broken bones and burned down warehouses under the suspicion that a rival family had taken her. When the ashes settled and he found nothing, he assumed she was dead. He mourned her in silence, turning his grief into a weapon that carved him into the ruthless head of the family he was today. And here she was, standing next to a funnel cake stand, looking like a suburban ghost. Linda's face was completely drained of blood. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. She took a half step backward, her worn sneakers scraping against the pavement. It was the instinct of a prey animal cornered by a predator. Mama? The girl on the left, the quiet one, tugged at Linda's jeans. The touch seemed to electrocute Linda back to life. She lunged forward, grabbing the arms of the 2 girls closest to her, physically yanking them behind her legs. She didn't say a word to Vincent. She didn't offer a tearful apology or a shocked greeting. She just gathered her children like a shield and tried to turn away. Don't, Vincent said. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrating command that didn't carry past the 3 feet between them, but it hit Linda like a physical blow. She froze, her back to him. He stepped closer. He could smell her now. Not the expensive, heavy jasmine perfume he used to buy for her. She smelled like laundry detergent and old frying oil. It broke something fundamental inside him. Turn around, Linda, he muttered, the syllables burning his tongue. You take 1 more step, and my men will have the exits blocked before you hit the crosswalk. It was a bluff. Mostly. He was here alone, save for a driver parked 2 blocks away. But she didn't know that. She only knew the Vincent from before, the one who was climbing the ranks with bloody knuckles. Linda slowly turned back around. Her chest was heaving. The girls huddled against her legs, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The ice cream cone dropped to the ground, the pink scoop splattering over Vincent's polished leather shoe. He didn't blink. Vincent, she whispered. Her voice shook, vibrating with a raw, ugly terror that made him sick to his stomach. She wasn't looking at his face. She was looking at his hands, watching for a weapon. A broken compass, he said, his voice flat, devoid of the hurricane roaring inside his head. He pointed a finger at the 3 identical faces peering at him from behind her thighs. And 3 girls. They look about 6. Linda swallowed hard. Her throat clicked. They're 5, small for their age. Don't lie to me, he snarled, the civilized veneer cracking. A woman walking past gave them a wide berth, shooting Vincent a nervous look. He forced his shoulders down, shoved his hands deep into his pockets so Linda wouldn't see them shaking. "Do not stand here and lie to my face, Linda. I can do the math. They're mine," she hissed back, a sudden, desperate ferocity lighting up her exhausted eyes. She pulled them tighter against her. "Just mine. They have my eyes," he countered, the reality of it finally sinking its claws into his brain. 3 of them. He had missed 6 years? First steps, first words, broken teeth and scraped knees. He had been sitting in dark rooms counting dirty money while she was raising his children in faded clothes. Why? The single word carried the weight of 7 years of rotting grief. Linda looked around frantically. "We can't do this here. Please, people are staring." Vincent glanced over his shoulder. A few of the syndicate's street-level guys were stationed near the festival entrance, completely oblivious to their boss having a mental breakdown by the trash cans. If he made a scene, it would get back to the underbosses. He couldn't afford weakness. Not now. "My car is parked on 4th and Elm," he said, his tone turning clinical, detached. It was the voice he used when ordering a hit. "Walk. Do not run. Do not try to duck into a store. If I lose sight of you, Linda, I will tear this entire borough apart, brick by brick. Understand?" She nodded once, a jerky mechanical motion. The walk to the car was agonizing. Vincent stayed exactly 2 paces behind them. He watched the way Linda ushered the girls, her hands constantly touching their heads, their shoulders, guiding them through the crowd. He watched the synchronized bounce of their curls. 3 girls. His blood. He felt entirely hollowed out. He was a man who dealt in control, in predictable outcomes. You threaten a man, he pays. You shoot a man, he bleeds. You love a woman, she stays. That was the rule he thought they had. But she hadn't stayed. She had run, carrying a secret that was currently leaving sticky footprints on the sidewalk. When they reached the sleek black SUV, his driver, Thomas, stepped out, his stoic expression faltering for a fraction of a second as he took in the ragged woman and the 3 identical toddlers. "Open the back," Vincent ordered. Linda balked at the door. "Vincent, please, don't put us in there. We can go to a diner, a public place." "Get in the car, Linda." She closed her eyes, a tear finally escaping and cutting a clean line through the dust on her cheek. She bundled the girls into the spacious back seat. They scrambled over the leather, suddenly fascinated by the luxury of the vehicle, the tension of the adults momentarily forgotten. Vincent slid into the back with them, leaving Linda to sit rigidly on the edge of the seat, as far away from him as possible. The heavy doors clicked shut, sealing them in a soundproof tomb of leather and expensive air conditioning. The engine idled, a low, comforting vibration that did nothing to soothe the electric tension inside the cabin. The tinted windows cast a grey pallor over everything, making the bright yellow of the girls' dresses look sickly and faded. Vincent sat in the corner, his elbow resting against the window frame, 2 fingers pressed hard against his temple. He had a headache that threatened to split his skull in half. The middle girl, the one who had spoken to him, was currently trying to buckle a seatbelt that was far too large for her, the metal clasp clanking loudly against the leather. "Stop that, Chloe," Linda murmured, her voice trembling. She reached out and batted the girl's hands away, her own hands shaking so badly she couldn't manage the buckle either. "Chloe," Vincent repeated quietly, tasting the name. He looked at the other 2. "And them?" Linda stared at her lap. Her knuckles were white. "Maya and Lily. Chloe, Maya, and Lily." He let his head fall back against the headrest, staring up at the plush ceiling. "You named them without me. You birthed them without me." He turned his head, his gaze pinning her down. "You let me think you were dead, Linda. For 7 years, I woke up every morning and looked at the empty side of the bed and wondered if the people I killed had somehow gotten to you." Linda flinched. The word killed hung in the small space, thick and suffocating. She covered the nearest girl's ears, Lily's, but the other two were already distracted by the buttons on the door panel. "That's exactly why I left," Linda said, her voice dropping to a harsh, desperate whisper. She finally looked at him, and he saw the dark circles under her eyes, the fine lines of chronic stress around her mouth. "You think I wanted to run? You think I wanted to raise triplets in a one-bedroom apartment over a dry cleaner, stretching canned soup for 3 days?" Vincent felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. "You had my money. You knew the safe codes." "I didn't want your blood money!" she snapped, suddenly leaning forward, the fear momentarily eclipsed by a bitter, protective rage. "Do you remember the night I left, Vincent? Do you?" He remembered every agonizing second. He had come home late, his shirt soaked in another man's blood. The apartment was dark, her closet was empty. Only her scent lingered, fading day by day until there was nothing left. "I was pregnant," she continued, her breathing shallow. "I found out that morning. I was going to tell you. I had cooked dinner, and then you walked in. You smelled like copper and gunpowder. You were holding your gun like it was an extension of your own hand. And your eyes." She shuddered, a full-bodied tremor that rattled her shoulders. "Your eyes were empty. There was nothing human left in them. I looked at you, and I realized I couldn't put a child in that house. I couldn't let my babies grow up thinking that violence was as normal as breathing." So you stole them from me," Vincent said, his tone lethally soft. He didn't defend himself. He knew what he was. He had accepted the monster in the mirror a long time ago, but he had always believed Linda was the one thing he would never corrupt. "You played God. You decided I wasn't worthy." "You weren't," she cried softly, tears spilling over her lashes. "You were going to war with the Moretti family. There were hitmen watching our building. Car bombs going off in the Bronx. If I stayed, they would have been targets before they were even born. I ran to keep them alive." Vincent looked away from her, his chest tightening until it hurt to inhale. He looked at Maya, who had found a pristine white handkerchief in the door pocket and was currently using it to wipe the sticky strawberry residue off her fingers, staining the expensive silk pink. He wanted to scream. He wanted to hit something, to shatter the bulletproof glass with his bare hands. The absolute worst part of her confession wasn't the betrayal. It was the fact that she was right. 7 years ago, he was a volatile, reckless soldier trying to usurp a throne. The violence was indiscriminate. If his enemies had known Linda was pregnant, they wouldn't have hesitated. They would have sent her back to him in pieces. But admitting she was right felt like swallowing broken glass. "The tattoo," he said suddenly, shifting the subject because the current one was tearing him apart from the inside. "Why did you get the compass?" Linda looked down at her hands. She rubbed her thumb over her wrist, an old, nervous habit. "I got it 2 years ago, in Chicago. I was waitressing at a diner. The girls were sick, ear infections, all 3 of them at once. I hadn't slept in 4 days. I was so tired, Vincent, so damn tired. I missed you." She let out a wet, pathetic laugh. "Isn't that sick? I was terrified of you. I ran from you, but I missed you every single day. I got the compass because no matter how far I ran, the needle was always pointing back to you." Vincent squeezed his eyes shut. The admission gutted him. It wasn't a romantic delindation. It was a tragedy. It was 2 ruined people who couldn't coexist without destroying each other. He opened his eyes and looked at the 3 girls. They were quiet now, sensing the heavy, depressive weight of their mother's tears. Chloe, the brave one, slid across the leather seat. She bypassed her mother entirely and stopped right next to Vincent's leg. She looked up at him, her pale blue eyes wide and solemn. She didn't look scared. She reached out her small, dirt-smudged hand and lightly traced the edge of the jagged compass on his arm. Her touch was so light he barely felt it, but it sent a shockwave straight to his core. "Mama cries when she looks at hers," Chloe stated matter-of-factly. "Do you cry when you look at yours?" Vincent stared at the little girl. His daughter. He felt the sting of moisture in his own eyes, a burning sensation he hadn't experienced since he was a child himself. He swallowed the lump of iron in his throat. "No," Vincent whispered, his voice cracking horribly. He slowly lifted his large, scarred hand, bringing it to rest gently against Chloe's soft, unruly curls. "I don't cry. I just get angry." Linda watched the exchange, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a sob. The ghost she had been running from wasn't a monster right now. He was just a broken man, sitting in a dark car, realizing exactly how much the world had stolen from him. Vincent looked up from Chloe and met Linda's tear-streaked gaze. The anger was still there, boiling just beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a crushing, absolute resolve. The cynic in him knew this was a disaster. The mob boss in him knew this was a massive vulnerability. But the man sitting in the back of the SUV had just found his needle. "You're not running anymore," Vincent said quietly. It wasn't a threat this time. It was a vow. "Thomas," the driver's voice came through the intercom instantly. "Yes, boss?" "Cancel the meeting with the docs. We're going to the estate." Linda's eyes widened in panic. "Vincent, no. You live in a one-bedroom over a dry cleaner." He cut her off, his voice hardening, leaving no room for argument. He looked at the strawberry stains, the dirty shoes, the exhaustion carved into the woman he loved. "That ends today. I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you lock your bedroom door every night. But my daughters do not wear frayed clothes, and their mother does not stretch canned soup." He leaned back, the decision settling into his bones like lead. "You're coming home, Linda, and God help anyone who tries to stop me from keeping you there." Gravel crunched beneath the heavy tires of the SUV, a rhythmic, grinding sound that usually signaled sanctuary. Today it sounded like a vault clicking shut. Vincent's estate sat on 4 acres of prime Long Island real estate, heavily wooded and surrounded by a wrought iron fence topped with security cameras. It was a fortress built by a paranoid man. As the vehicle rolled to a stop in front of the sweeping limestone steps, Vincent looked at his home through Linda's eyes. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a mausoleum. "Out," he said, his voice flat. Linda unbuckled the girls with trembling hands. They spilled out onto the immaculate driveway, their scuffed sneakers looking violently out of place against the pale, expensive stone. The summer heat was instantly oppressive, but Linda shivered, wrapping her arms around her thin frame. She stared up at the towering oak doors. "It's big," Maya whispered, clutching the stained silk handkerchief Vincent had let her keep. "Too big," Lily agreed, hiding behind Linda's leg. Vincent walked past them, punching a code into the keypad hidden behind a stone lion. The heavy doors groaned open, releasing a wave of chilled, heavily conditioned air that smelled of lemon oil, beeswax, and cold marble. He stepped inside and waited. Linda hesitated on the threshold. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the doorframe. She looked like a woman stepping up to a gallows. "I won't carry you across," Vincent said, the harshness returning to his tone. It was a defense mechanism. He couldn't handle her fear, so he defaulted to authority. "Walk inside, Linda." She swallowed, closing her eyes for a fraction of a second, and pushed her girls forward. The foyer echoed. Every scuff of a rubber sole, every intake of breath bounced off the high, vaulted ceilings. Chloe spun in a slow circle, her head tilted all the way back to stare at the massive crystal chandelier hanging like a frozen waterfall above them. "Who lives here?" Chloe asked, her voice bouncing off the walls. "I do." Vincent replied. "Are you a king?" Vincent felt a bitter, cynical smile ghost across his lips. Something like that. He caught Linda shooting him a look of pure, unadulterated venom. A king of thieves, a king of corpses. He read the words in her eyes as clearly as if she had screamed them. "Mrs. Gable!" Vincent barked. The shout was too loud. Maya flinched violently, bursting into sudden, high-pitched tears. Vincent froze. He looked at the crying 5-year-old, his heart seizing in his chest. He took a step toward her, his hands twitching uselessly at his sides. He knew how to break a man's jaw. He knew how to dismantle a cartel's supply line. He had absolutely no idea how to stop a child from crying. Linda dropped to her knees instantly. She didn't shush the girl. She just pulled Maya into her chest, burying her face in the messy brown curls, rocking her gently back and forth. "It's okay, baby. It's just an echo. It's just a big, loud house. Mama's here." Vincent stood there, feeling entirely superfluous. He was the most powerful man in the tri-state area, and in his own foyer, he was a clumsy, terrifying monster who made his daughter weep. A sturdy, grey-haired woman hurried down the curved staircase, wiping her hands on a pristine apron. Mrs. Gable stopped dead on the bottom step, her eyes widening behind thick spectacles. She looked from Vincent to the ragged woman on the floor, to the 3 identical faces. "Mr. Rossi," she breathed, entirely thrown off balance. "Prepare the East Wing guest suites." Vincent ordered, tearing his eyes away from Linda and Maya. He kept his voice deliberately low this time. "All 3 connected rooms. Get the chef to make something kid-friendly. Pasta, chicken, I don't care. Just make a lot of it." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Mrs. Gable hurried off, casting one last bewildered glance over her shoulder. "I don't want to be in the East Wing," Linda said, standing up, Maya still clinging to her neck. "I want us in one room, together." "The beds are king-sized," Vincent countered. "There's plenty of room, but they get their own space. They aren't sleeping on top of each other anymore." "They're sleeping with me," Linda snapped, her maternal instinct completely overriding her fear of him. She glared at him, a fierce, protective fire burning away the exhaustion. "They are in a strange place with a man who carries a gun in the waistband of his tailored pants. You really think I'm letting them out of my sight?" Vincent's hand instinctively brushed his hip, feeling the cold, hard weight of the steel concealed beneath his jacket. He hadn't realized it was printing. Or maybe Linda just knew him too well. He stared her down, the silence stretching taut between them. The syndicate bent to his will. Politicians took his calls. But this tired, frayed woman in a hardware store t-shirt held her ground, daring him to push her. He broke eye contact first. "Fine. 1 room. But tomorrow I'm having a decorator come in. They get whatever they want." "You can't buy them," Linda whispered, her voice laced with a tragic certainty. "Watch me," Vincent replied, turning on his heel. He needed a drink. He needed 5. The air in the foyer was suddenly too thin to breathe. Midnight settled over the estate like a heavy velvet curtain. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the perpetual sirens and traffic of the city. Vincent stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, staring out at the manicured lawns bathed in the harsh, white glare of security lights. A crystal tumbler of scotch rested in his hand. The ice had melted an hour ago, watering down the amber liquid. But he hadn't taken a sip. His skin crawled with adrenaline. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the jagged compass on Linda's ribs, felt the phantom touch of Chloe's sticky finger on his arm. 3 girls, 5 years old. He set the glass down on his mahogany desk with a sharp clink. He needed to check on them. The walk to the east wing felt like crossing a minefield. The thick carpet absorbed the sound of his footsteps. He paused outside the heavy oak door of the master guest suite. It was cracked open just an inch. A sliver of warm, yellow light spilled out onto the hallway floor. Vincent pushed the door open, the hinges completely silent. The massive bed was a tangled nest of heavy silk sheets and down comforters. The three girls were piled together in the center, a chaotic jumble of limbs and curly hair. Maya had her thumb in her mouth. Lily was sprawled across Chloe's legs. They were breathing in a slow, synchronized rhythm. Vincent felt a physical ache in his chest, a hollow, grinding pain that radiated down to his ribs. He stepped closer. The room smelled of the expensive lavender soap Mrs. Gable had left out, mixed with the faint, lingering scent of the street festival. He noticed the empty space on the far left side of the mattress. The sheets were pulled back, but Linda wasn't there. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his veins. He spun around, his hand instinctively dropping to his hip. "I'm not running," a quiet voice said from the shadows. Vincent whipped his head toward the adjoining sitting room. Linda sat curled in a leather armchair by the unlit fireplace. She was wearing one of his discarded dress shirts, a crisp white button-down that swallowed her completely, falling halfway down her thighs. She had her knees pulled to her chest, a glass of tap water resting against her cheek. Vincent let out a slow, jagged breath, his hand falling away from his weapon. He stepped into the sitting room, leaving the bedroom door open behind him. "You should be sleeping," he said. His voice was rough, scraping against the quiet of the room. "I haven't slept through the night in 5 years, Vincent. A fancy mattress isn't going to fix that." She didn't look at him. She stared at the empty fireplace. They had colic, all three of them. I used to put them in their car seats and drive around the industrial park at 3 in the morning, because the rumble of the engine was the only thing that stopped the crying. Vincent leaned against the doorframe. The contrast between them was agonizing. He was standing in custom Italian slacks. She was drowning in his old shirt, talking about driving a beta car through empty lots just to survive. "Why didn't you go to your sister?" he asked. Linda let out a bitter, exhausted laugh. "And bring your enemies to her doorstep? No, I cut ties with everyone. I changed my name. I worked under the table." She finally turned her head to look at him. The ambient light caught the dark, bruising circles under her eyes. "Do you know how much a hospital bill is for a premature triplet birth, Vincent? I scrubbed diner floors until my hands bled to pay that off so social services wouldn't take them away. The urge to break something, to shatter the window, to punch through the plaster wall was nearly overwhelming." He closed his eyes, fighting the violent surge of protective rage. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she hissed, her voice rising before she visibly fought to lower it, glancing anxiously toward the bedroom. "Because the alternative was letting them grow up in a house built on blood. I would rather they be poor than be collateral damage." Vincent pushed off the doorframe. He crossed the room slowly, deliberately, stopping just a foot away from her chair. He could smell her now. Not the diner, not the fear, just Linda. The clean, raw scent of the woman who used to trace the veins on his hands while he slept. "I am the head of the commission now," Vincent stated, his voice a low, vibrating hum in the dark. "The Morettis are gone. The war is over. I wiped them out 3 years ago." Linda looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. She saw the absolute, terrifying deadness in his eyes when he talked about the rival family. He hadn't just defeated them, he had exterminated them. "You think that makes it better?" she whispered, shrinking back into the leather chair. "You think telling me you slaughtered a dozen men makes me feel safe here? It means nobody touches what is mine," Vincent replied. He leaned down, placing a hand on either arm of her chair, trapping her in his space. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was a physical weight. "It means you never scrub another floor. It means they never wear second-hand clothes. I am a monster, Linda. I know what I am. But I am your monster. I will burn this city to the bedrock before I let anything happen to them. Or to you." Linda stared back at him, her chest heaving beneath the oversized white shirt. The terror was still there, but mixed in with it was a twisted, reluctant familiarity. She knew the darkness in him. She always had. She slowly raised a trembling hand. She didn't push him away. Instead, her fingers brushed lightly against the lapel of his dark shirt, resting over his heart. She could feel the heavy, frantic beating beneath the fabric. "You can't protect them from yourself, Vincent," she whispered, a single tear spilling over her lashes. "That's what I'm afraid of." Vincent closed his eyes, the light touch of her fingers burning a hole straight through his chest. He had no answer for that, because he knew she was right. Morning light filtered through the heavy drapes, casting a grey, dusty hue over the formal dining room. The table was a massive slab of polished mahogany, large enough to seat 20 underbosses. Today, it seated 3 toddlers and an array of scattered cereal boxes. Vincent sat at the head of the table. He was already dressed in a charcoal 3-piece suit, his tie perfectly knotted, looking every inch the ruthless architect of the city's underworld. He watched in silence as Lily meticulously picked out only the pink marshmallows from her bowl, lining them up on the mahogany. Linda stood near the sideboard, a mug of black coffee clasped in both hands. She was wearing a pair of sweatpants Mrs. Gable had procured, and her hair was tied back. She looked tense, her eyes darting toward the arched doorway every time the floorboards creaked in the hallway. "Eat the cereal part, Lily," Linda murmured, her voice tight. "I don't like the brown ones," Lily stated stubbornly. Vincent picked up a silver spoon, scooped a mound of the brown cereal, and held it out. "Eat it." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the unquestionable authority he used to command a room of armed men. Lily paused. She looked at the silver spoon, then up at Vincent's unsmiling face. To Linda's absolute horror, the little girl didn't cry. She leaned forward, opened her mouth, and ate the cereal off the spoon. She chewed slowly, maintaining eye contact with the terrifying man at the head of the table. Vincent set the spoon down. Good. The heavy, oppressive silence of the breakfast was shattered by the sharp, grating buzz of the intercom near the door. Vincent didn't flinch. He pressed a button under the lip of the table. "Yes." Thomas's voice crackled through the speaker. "Boss, Leo is at the gate. He says it's urgent, regarding the docks." Linda's head snapped up. The coffee sloshed over the rim of her mug, burning her knuckles. She ignored the pain, her eyes wide with sudden panic. Leo. She remembered Leo. He was a shark in a tailored suit, Vincent's most vicious enforcer. He was the very reason she had run in the first place. "Keep him at the gate," Vincent ordered. "He's already inside the perimeter, boss. He followed the caterer's van through." Vincent's jaw locked. A muscle ticked violently under his cheekbone. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Maya jumped, dropping her spoon into her milk with a splash. "Stay here," Vincent commanded, locking eyes with Linda. "Do not come out into the hallway. Keep them quiet." He didn't wait for her response. He strode out of the dining room, pulling the heavy double doors shut behind him until they clicked. The foyer was bright and cold. Leo was standing near the center, wiping his expensive leather shoes on the Persian rug. He looked up as Vincent approached, a slick, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Vince! Sorry to crash the morning coffee," Leo said, his voice smooth like oiled glass. "But when you blow off a shipment at midnight and go completely dark, people get nervous. The Colombians are asking questions." "The Colombians get paid either way. Tell them to wait," Vincent replied, his tone lethal. He stopped 10 feet away from Leo, his posture relaxed but coiled like a spring. Leo tilted his head, his eyes sweeping the massive, empty foyer. "You never cancel a drop?" "Never." "What happened?" "You look like you haven't slept." "I had personal business," Vincent said smoothly. "It's handled." Leo's gaze drifted past Vincent. He paused. The slick smile faded, replaced by a sharp, predatory curiosity. Vincent didn't turn around, but his peripheral vision caught it. A small, bright yellow sandal. It was sitting halfway up the grand staircase, dropped by Maya the night before when she was crying. It stuck out against the dark wood and white marble like a flare gun going off in the dark. "Personal business," Leo repeated softly, his eyes locked on the tiny shoe. "Since when do you host playdates, Vince?" The air in the foyer suddenly dropped 10 degrees. Vincent felt the familiar, cold rush of adrenaline flood his veins. He took a slow, deliberate step to the left, physically blocking Leo's line of sight to the stairs. "Leo," Vincent said. His voice was a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a razor blade. Leo looked back at Vincent, his eyes narrowing slightly at the sudden, overwhelming shift in his boss's demeanor. "You and I have known each other for 15 years. Vincent continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't need to. The violence radiating off him was palpable, heavy enough to choke on. "So I am going to give you one piece of advice, and you are going to take it to your grave." Leo swallowed hard, the smirk entirely gone. He realized, too late, that he had stepped onto a landmine. "Vince, hey, I was just... You didn't see anything on those stairs." Vincent interrupted, stepping into Leo's personal space. He loomed over the enforcer, a shadow blocking out the morning light. "You don't ask questions. You don't mention this to the capos. You don't mention this to your wife. You don't mention this to your priest. Because if I even hear a whisper of a rumor about what's inside my house, I won't just kill you, Leo. I will erase you and everyone you have ever cared about from the face of the earth. Not if you understand." Leo stared at the dead, absolute void in Vincent's eyes. This wasn't the tactical mob boss he knew. This was an animal backed into a corner, ready to tear out throats. Leo nodded once, slowly. "Understood, boss. Completely." "Good." Vincent stepped back, the suffocating pressure lifting instantly, replaced by a cold, businesslike veneer. "I'll be at the warehouse in an hour. Handle the Colombians until I get there." Leo didn't waste a second. He turned and practically sprinted for the heavy oak doors, eager to escape the suffocating tension of the foyer. The doors shut with a heavy thud. Vincent stood alone in the silence. He let out a harsh, ragged breath, running a hand over his face. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. He had brought them into a fortress, but the walls were made of glass. His world was already bleeding in. A soft click behind him made him turn. The dining room door was open an inch. Linda stood in the gap. Her face was chalk white. She had heard everything. The casual mention of Colombians, the ruthless, terrifying threat against a man who was supposed to be his friend. She looked from Vincent to the yellow shoe on the stairs, and then back to him. The reluctant familiarity from the night before was gone, replaced by the stark, horrifying reality of the man she was bound to. Vincent didn't try to explain or apologize. He just looked at her, his jaw set, accepting the hatred in her eyes. He was a monster. But as he turned to walk up the stairs to retrieve his daughter's shoe, he knew he would gladly be the devil himself if it kept them alive. Water scalding his hands was the only way Vincent knew how to scrub away the warehouse. He stood over the stainless steel sink in his private bathroom, digging a coarse pumice stone into the knuckles of his right hand. The water running down the drain was tinged a faint, rusty pink. It wasn't his blood. The Colombians had pushed, Vincent had pushed back. Harder. He shut off the faucet with a sharp twist of his wrist. The sudden silence in the bathroom was deafening, save for the hum of the ventilation fan. He smelled like abrasive industrial soap, stale cigarette smoke, and the sharp, metallic tang of cordite. He grabbed a heavy Egyptian cotton towel, drying his hands with brutal efficiency. He needed a drink. He needed a dark room. Instead, he walked out into the hallway and headed towards the east wing. The heavy oak door to the guest suite was ajar. As he pushed it open, the sterile, silent atmosphere of his mansion vanished, replaced by absolute chaos. Humid air rolled out of the adjoining master bathroom, carrying the heavy, artificial scent of strawberry bubble bath. The sound of splashing water echoed off the marble tiles, punctuated by a high-pitched squeal. Vincent stepped to the bathroom doorway. The room was a disaster zone. Puddles of soapy water coated the imported Italian marble floor. Wet towels lay discarded like casualties of war. In the center of it all was the massive sunken tub, currently overflowing with pink foam. Linda was on her knees at the edge of the tub, wearing a damp grey t-shirt that clung to her back. Her hair was falling out of a messy bun, wet strands plastered to her neck. She was trying to wrangle Lily, who was currently attempting to climb out of the tub entirely naked and slick as a seal, while Chloe and Maya engaged in a fierce, splashing war on the other end. "Lily, sit down right now," Linda pleaded, her voice cracking with exhaustion. She wiped a blob of pink foam off her cheek, leaving a smear of damp skin behind. "I mean it. You're going to slip and crack your head open." "I don't like the bubbles," Lily shrieked, kicking her legs and sending a wave of water over the rim, soaking Linda's jeans from the knees down. Vincent stood frozen in the doorway. He commanded an army of killers. He dictated the flow of illegal narcotics across 3 state lines. But watching Linda wrestle a slippery 5-year-old made him feel entirely useless. He took a step forward. His leather shoe slipped slightly on the wet tile, making a loud squeak. Linda whipped her head around. Her eyes widened, instantly defensive. She instinctively moved an arm across the tub, shielding the girls from his view, even though they were buried in foam. "I knocked," Vincent lied, his voice a low gravel. He hadn't. He never knocked in his own house. "We're busy," Linda snapped, her chest heaving. She looked at his crisp, dark suit, then down at her soaked clothes. The disparity was a physical wedge between them. "Give us 10 minutes. You look like you're drowning," Vincent pointed out flatly. He didn't wait for permission. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, shrugging it off and tossing it onto a dry patch of the vanity counter. He unfastened his cuffs, rolling the sleeves of his expensive white shirt up past his elbows. He walked over to the tub, ignoring the water seeping into his dress shoes. Linda tensed, pressing herself back against the edge of the tub to give him space. "Vincent, don't. Your clothes." He ignored her. He crouched down beside her. The scent of strawberries was overpowering. He looked at Lily, who had frozen mid-escape, her blue eyes wide, staring at the sudden appearance of the giant in her bathroom. "Sit," Vincent told the little girl. He didn't yell. He didn't use the voice he used on Leo. He used a flat, immovable tone, a fact of nature. Lily blinked, her lower lip trembling slightly. She looked at Linda, then back at Vincent. Slowly her small, slippery body slid back down into the pink water with a soft splash. "Give me the soap," Vincent said, holding his hand out to Linda. Linda hesitated. Her eyes dropped to his exposed forearms. The jagged compass tattoo sat dark against his skin on the left. But on his right arm, a thick silver scar cut a jagged path from his wrist to his elbow, a knife wound from a turf war 4 years ago. It was ugly. It was violent. Slowly, she placed a plastic bottle of cheap, tear-free shampoo into his massive, calloused hand. Vincent squeezed a generous dollop into his palm. He looked at Chloe, who had paddled over, watching him with intense or fearless curiosity. "Turn around," he instructed her. Chloe obeyed, presenting her back to him. Vincent hesitated. His hands were built for violence. They broke bones, they choked out life. He stared at the fragile, wet curls plastered to the back of his daughter's neck. He was terrified he was going to snap her in half just by touching her. He forced his fingers to relax. He gently massaged the soap into her hair. He felt the delicate curve of her skull, the fragile vertebrae of her neck. He was clumsier than Linda, his movements stiff and overly cautious, but Chloe didn't seem to mind. She hummed a tuneless song under her breath. "You smell like smoke," Maya observed from the other side of the tub, her nose wrinkling. "Maya!" Linda scolded sharply in a low whisper. "It's fine," Vincent said, keeping his eyes on his task. He rinsed the soap out of Chloe's hair using a plastic cup. "I was working." "Do you work at a fire station?" Lily asked, suddenly interested again. Vincent met Linda's gaze over the girls' heads. Her eyes were dark, filled with a complex, painful mix of dread and sorrow. She knew exactly what kind of work made him smell like smoke and copper. "No," Vincent answered quietly, looking back down at the pink water. "I just clean up messes." The rest of the bath passed in a strained, surreal silence. Vincent helped Linda pull the girls out, wrapping them in massive, fluffy white towels that swallowed them whole. He watched Linda herd them into the bedroom, leaving wet footprints on the carpet, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Vincent remained in the bathroom. He looked down at his soaked trousers, his ruined shoes, the sleeves of his shirt stained pink. He leaned over the sink, gripping the marble edge until his knuckles turned white, and squeezed his eyes shut. For the first time in 7 years, he felt the icy grip of true fear. Not fear of a bullet, not fear of prison. Fear that he was an infection, and he had just willingly brought 3 innocent hosts into his quarantined world. Rain hammered the reinforced glass of the study, a violent 2 a.m. squall drowning out the distant city. Vincent sat in the dark, the leather of his armchair cold against his spine. A half-smoked cigar rested in a crystal ashtray, sending a thin ribbon of smoke into the stale air. He wasn't looking at the topographical maps scattered across his desk. He was staring at the grid of 30 security monitors mounted on the far wall. His encrypted phone vibrated, a single violent pulse against the mahogany. Vincent didn't reach for it. His eyes locked on camera 12, covering the blind spot near the carriage house. The screen flickered, burst into grey static, and went black. 2 seconds later, camera 14 followed. Ice flooded his veins. He stood, his chair scraping loudly in the quiet room. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk, his fingers wrapped around the textured grip of a suppressed Heckler & Koch pistol. He chambered around. The mechanical clack was instantly swallowed by a foundation-rattling boom of thunder. He bypassed the main hallway, taking the servant corridors toward the east wing. Emergency lights were hardwired to stay off during a breach, blinding anyone who didn't know the house by touch. He pushed the guest suite door open. A jagged flash of lightning illuminated the room in a harsh, blue-white strobe. Linda sat bolt upright in the center of the bed. She clutched the heavy sheets to her chest, her knuckles bone white. The 3 girls huddled against her ribs, whimpering as the thunder rolled away. "Vincent?" Linda whispered. The raw panic in her voice scraped the inside of his skull. "Get up," he ordered, his voice a flat, dead calm. "Don't turn on a light. Keep them quiet." Linda didn't hesitate. 7 years of looking over her shoulder took over. She threw the covers aside, grabbing Maya and Lily by their wrists, hauling them off the mattress. Chloe slid down on her own, bare feet hitting the carpet with a soft thud. "Mama, it's dark." Maya cried softly, her voice thick with sleep. "Shh," Linda hissed, pressing a hand gently over the girl's mouth. "Quiet game, baby." Vincent closed the distance in 3 long strides. He grabbed Linda's upper arm. His grip was bruising, entirely lacking the gentle hesitation from the bathroom earlier. He hauled her toward the walk-in closet, shoving aside a row of heavy wool coats. Behind them sat a solid steel panel, flush against the drywall. He pressed his thumb to a hidden biometric scanner. A green light blinked. The steel panel hissed, sliding back to reveal a windowless room bathed in the red glow of backup LED strips. "Get inside," Vincent commanded. Linda pushed the girls into the narrow space. It smelled of cold concrete and recycled air. She turned back in the doorway, physically blocking him from closing it. In the bloody red light, her eyes dropped to the matte black pistol gripped in his hand. The exact violence she had starved herself to escape was staring her right in the face. "Who is out there?" she breathed, chest heaving. "It doesn't matter," Vincent said, stepping back. "You do not open this door for anyone but me. If the comms panel flashes yellow, it means I am dead. Thomas will pull you out through the basement tunnels." Linda lunged forward, her ice-cold fingers wrapping desperately around his wrist. She looked at the man she had run from, and the contradiction tore her in half. She despised the monster in him, but right now, that monster was the only thing standing between her babies and a shallow grave. "Don't die," she whispered fiercely. "You don't get to drag us back here just to leave us." A muscle twitched violently in his jaw. He reached up with his free hand, thumb brushing a damp curl away from her terrified eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." He pulled his arm back and hit the exterior wall switch. The heavy steel door slid shut, locking pins driving into the frame with a concussive thunk. Vincent turned away. The temperature in the room plummeted. The vulnerable man who had washed his daughter's hair ceased to exist. His breathing slowed. His eyes went dead. He melted into the shadows of the hallway, moving toward the grand staircase. He smelled them before he heard the wet squeak of rubber soles, damp wool, cheap chemical aftershave, and the sharp tang of adrenaline. 3 men. They crept up the marble stairs, sweeping suppressed submachine guns across the dark landing. Lightning flashed, casting distorted, frantic shadows against the wallpaper. Vincent didn't wait. He stepped out from behind a heavy marble bust. He raised his weapon. The recoil was a sharp punch against his palm. The suppressor choked the gunshot into a pressurized fart. The lead man dropped instantly, his skull snapping back before his body tumbled down the carpeted stairs with a sickening crunch. The other 2 panicked, firing wildly into the dark. Bullets chewed through the plaster walls, showering Vincent with sharp, dusty debris. He didn't flinch. He adjusted his stance, tracking the bloom of their muzzle flashes. Foot. The second man choked, weapon clattering against the banister as his knees gave out. The third man turned to run. Vincent aimed for center mass and squeezed the trigger. The man went down hard, sliding face first across the slick, polished marble below. Silence rushed back into the house, broken only by rain and wet, desperate, gurgling breaths. Vincent descended the stairs slowly. He stepped over the bleeding bodies, his face completely blank, scanning the massive foyer. A shadow shifted near the heavy oak front doors. "You're slipping, Vince." Leo's voice echoed. It was strained, vibrating with a nervous energy. "You should have kept your ghosts hidden." Vincent aimed into the dark corner. "You crossed the gate, Leo." "You made yourself weak!" Leo shouted, stepping out from behind a decorative pillar. He had a gun raised, hands shaking slightly in the gloom. "The families talk. They know you skipped the drop. They know you're suddenly soft. I was doing the commission a favor." "You were making a sloppy grab for the chair," Vincent corrected, tone devoid of emotion. "Maybe." Leo sneered, breath hitching. "But it doesn't matter. There's an armed team outside. They're going to burn this place to the ground. You and the baggage." Vincent didn't argue. He simply pulled the trigger. The bullet caught Leo square in the throat. The enforcer's eyes bulged in shock, hands flying to his neck as his weapon hit the floor. He stumbled backward, hitting the heavy door, and slid down, leaving a thick, wet smear against the wood. Vincent walked over to him. He kicked Leo's gun out of reach. He looked down at the man who had been his right hand for a decade. He felt absolutely nothing. No regret. Just cold, mechanical necessity. He pulled his phone from his pocket, swiping the cracked screen. He dialed his driver. "Boss?" Thomas answered instantly, the heavy roar of an engine audible in the background. "Clean up the foyer," Vincent ordered, staring at the pooling blood soaking into his Persian rug. "There's a strike team outside the gate. Handle them." "Understood." Vincent hung up. He looked at his hands, smelling the distinct metallic copper scent filling the air. He was going to need to wash them again. The red light on the panic room panel blinked, turning a solid, bright green. Linda flinched as the heavy steel door hissed open. She was sitting on the floor of the closet, the three girls tucked under her arms, asleep from sheer emotional exhaustion. Vincent stood in the doorway. The emergency power had kicked back on in the main house, casting him in the harsh glare of the overhead lights. He was a terrifying sight. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing a dark, angry graze where a bullet had clipped him. Plaster dust coated his dark hair and clothes. There were streaks of blood on his jaw and his hands. Linda's breath hitched. She didn't look at the blood. She looked at his eyes. They were dark, hollowed out, the eyes of a man who had just severed a piece of his own soul to survive. "It's clear," Vincent said. His voice was hoarse, entirely flat. Linda gently untangled herself from the sleeping girls. She stood up, her legs shaking so badly she had to lean against the steel doorframe for a second to steady herself. She stepped out of the closet, closing the door softly behind her to keep the girls inside. She walked toward him. She didn't hesitate. She didn't shrink away from the smell of gunpowder and copper that clung to him like a second skin. She reached out, her trembling fingers gently touching the torn fabric at his shoulder. Vincent winced slightly, a sharp intake of breath hissing through his teeth. "Sit down," Linda commanded softly, pointing to the edge of the large bed. Vincent obeyed. He felt entirely drained, the adrenaline leaving his system in a rapid, nauseating wave. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his head hanging, staring at his ruined, bloody hands. Linda went into the bathroom. She returned a minute later with a damp washcloth, a bottle of antiseptic, and a towel. She knelt on the floor in front of him, slipping comfortably back into the dynamic they had shared a lifetime ago, when he was just a foot soldier coming home battered from the streets. She took his right hand, the one with the heavy silver scar. She began to wipe the dried blood from his knuckles. Her touch was excruciatingly gentle. "Who was it?" she asked quietly, not looking up from his hand. "Leo." Linda's hand stopped for a fraction of a second. She swallowed hard, staring at the raw, bruised skin on his knuckles. "Is he dead?" "Yes." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Linda resumed wiping his hand. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. The cynical, brutal reality of their situation had finally burned away the last of her illusions. She had run to escape this exact moment, yet here she was, kneeling in the blood she had tried to avoid. "He won't be the last," Linda said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "There will be another Leo, another rival family, another sniper in the dark." "I know," Vincent replied, staring down at the crown of her head. "I can't live in a bunker, Vincent," she said, finally looking up. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her jaw was set with a stubborn, fierce resolve. "I won't let them grow up flinching at shadows. I won't let them normalize the smell of blood." Vincent felt the cold, hard knot in his chest tighten. "You want me to let you go?" It wasn't a question. It was a death sentence. "No," Linda said softly. The word surprised him so much he physically jerked back. She tightened her grip on his hand, anchoring him in place. "I spent 7 years running from you, and it almost broke me. I'm not running anymore. But I won't stay in a war zone, Vincent. You have to choose." Vincent stared at her, uncomprehending. "Choose what? This is what I am. I run the commission. If I step down, they will tear me apart. They will come for you to get to me. Then don't step down," Linda countered, her voice hardening. "Change the board. Liquidate the street operations. Move the money into legitimate shipping. Buy off the politicians. Shut down the drug routes and turn the syndicate into a ghost. You're smart enough to do it. You've just been too angry to try." Vincent looked towards the closet, the heavy steel door hiding his daughters. He thought about Chloe tracing his tattoo. He thought about Lily eating cereal off his silver spoon. He thought about the absolute terror in Linda's eyes when the storm broke. He looked back at the woman kneeling in front of him. She wasn't a hostage anymore. She was the only true thing in a life built on lies. "It will take time," Vincent said slowly, the gears in his mind already grinding, calculating the sheer violence and political maneuvering it would take to launder his entire organization. "It will be dangerous. We will have to disappear for a while. Out of the country. A fortress somewhere they can't reach." Linda let out a shaky breath, a single tear cutting a clean line through the dust on her cheek. "I don't care where we go, as long as it's not a cage." Vincent reached out with his left hand, the one uninjured, and gently cupped her face. His thumb traced her jawline, feeling the erratic pulse hammering beneath her skin. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Southeast," he whispered, his voice thick with a raw, terrifying vulnerability. Linda closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, her hands wrapping tightly around his wrists. "Southeast," she agreed. The storm raged outside, rattling the windows, but the silence inside the room was finally unbroken. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a messy, dangerous, imperfect truce forged in blood and desperation. But as Vincent sat in the dim light, his hands stained and his future uncertain, he knew one thing with absolute, cynical clarity. The compass was finally pointing home. Did the explosive, emotional clash between Linda and Vincent keep you on the edge of your seat? The line between love and survival is razor thin in the criminal underworld, and their imperfect, dangerous romance proves that sometimes the only way out is through the fire. If you felt every heartbeat, every contradiction, and every terrifying choice in this Mafia drama, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with fellow romance and thriller addicts, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, grounded, and emotionally raw storytelling. What do you think Vincent will do next? Comment below.